Greetings everybody, it's GleeCon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. This has just been a star-crossed day for me. I started the day off with a power outage that made me have to replay that last Blood Elf level. And then had to watch the old football team get waxed to epic proportions. As long as they let me watch it. And it was so bad they took it off TV. And then, here we go, I finished up my evening by making up another Sylvanas level. And just like happened a few episodes back on this, maybe even the last one I did, my audio, I don't know what it is, if it's the USB port, if it's the mic itself. It's just having this glitch sometimes where it'll run for about 2 minutes and then just cut. So, here I am making this video for the second time because the audio didn't capture last time. On the last episode, what did we do? I think we read a Chronicles, Civil War in the Plague Lands, where we just talked about how the Scourge, now that the Lich King is mortally wounded, essentially, some of the Scourge are starting to get their free will back. And we've touched on this in Arthas and some of our other things as well. But stay a while and listen to Chapter 13 of the novel Sylvanas as we see this in a more intimate kind of perspective from Sylvanas herself. Arthas, the Lich King he served, and the terrifying burning legion with whom they had allied were far from finished with their glorious conquest of Azeroth. The legion was, Sylvanas was told, a vast army of demons and corrupted races. Their goal was nothing less than the destruction of all life, everywhere. There were more continents and cities to vanquish, more living things to turn into the mindless undead scourge, and more demons to work with in bringing about those goals. Sylvanas was an involuntary cog in this grand machine. Arthas commanded, she obeyed, and she, who was once a thorn in his side, became one of his top generals. She accompanied him as he spoke with Archimond, one of the most powerful of the demonic dreadlords, and she stood beside Arthas as the demon destroyed the mighty city of Dalaran. The only pleasure she took from any of this was the chance to needle her master, sensing a hint of regret in the Death Knight at Dalaran's fall. When Arthas, obeying his own master, traveled to the continent of Kalimdor, Sylvanas and Kel'Thuzad were ordered to stay behind to protect the capital city. The Legion had its own representatives too, a trio of Dreadlord brothers, Balnazar, Detharak, and Varamathras. Sylvanas did not fill the months that her tormentor was away from Lordaeron with brooding or fruitless anger. The Lich King only rarely spoke in her mind now. His attention was elsewhere, and she was glad of the respite. Arthas unwittingly had given her a purpose, one she seized upon eagerly, and she turned her mind to the idea of discovering where her physical body lay, undecaying, alone and preserved. Even as a banshee, Sylvanas loved a good hunt. Sylvanas had been correct in her assumption of Arthas's inability to keep silent when it would serve him. He was like a drunkard in his cups, Arthas, intoxicated by the idea of his own cleverness, and like drunkards with too much wine, he let slip more than he knew. The days unfolded, and she continued to analyze what she knew, and the tangle began to unravel as she patiently pulled it apart, thread by thread. Arthas would not have had much time to dispose of her body. It was likely somewhere in Quel'Thalas. Cold stone could mean anything, really. A box of iron, a sarcophagus. He had said, too, that she would despise the ones who guarded her. Had he given her body to the trolls? The thought infuriated her so utterly that for a moment her mind was blank, filled with nothing but hate and vengeance. Then reason slowly reasserted itself. No, it could not be the trolls. They would have taken too much delight in ripping her to pieces, and Sylvanas felt certain that was not the case. She let the puzzle go for now, discouraged and more shaken than she cared to admit at the thought of her lifeless body being given into the care of those who had hated and slain her people for millennia. Her corpse, lying alone in darkness, locked in an iron coffin atop cold stone in a tower, guarded by one she would find loathsome. Her other amusement was watching and listening to the Dreadlords. Hideous things, they were vaguely human-like, except for their cloven feet, horns, and bat-like wings. So other than being like bipedal, I don't know how they're human-like. She had overheard their conversations a few times, but she did not understand much of what they said. There were references like sire and home and guests, but despite their courtesy to Arthas, Sylvanas had never trusted them. Apparently, neither did those who commanded them. Arthas had gone to Kalimdor to aid Archimonde, but Kel'Thuzad told Sylvanas that our king had turned on the demon, and the Legion had been soundly defeated. Yet many months later, listening from a small hill above the three conversing demons, Sylvanas overheard them wondering why Archimonde had not sent orders for them. They were to find that out scant moments later, as Arthas himself returned after so long away to inform the three of the Legion's defeat and his intent to kill them. Who are my Mathras? Balnazar. This isn't over, human, Deathrock cried. The sickly glow of fell magic wrapped about their forms, and they vanished. Kel'Thuzad hastened to greet his beloved master, Sylvanas trailing reluctantly after him. Arthas had not changed, she noted. He was still as confident and egotistical as ever, demanding to know if they had missed him, reminding them to call him king now that he had driven out the Dreadlords. All was as it had been, and for a moment Sylvanas bleakly wondered if anything would ever change. And then it happened. Arthas grimaced and contracted in pain, hunching over his undead steed, unable to bite back a cry of pure agony. King Arthas, Kel'Thuzad exclaimed, do you need assistance? Sylvanas did not think she had ever heard a sweeter sound. She had known the pain of Arthas' suffering would be gratifying to behold, but this was more satisfying than she had expected, even if she was not the one causing the torment. Indeed, she had no idea what was happening to the Death Knight. All she knew is that she hoped it would go on for a very, very long time. But too soon he recovered. To Kel'Thuzad he said, the pain has passed, but my powers are diminished. Sylvanas was stunned. Could this be? Could he truly be weakening? Why? What did it mean for him and for her? Arthas' pet lich helped him find a place to rest. She watched them go, pleasure and anticipation thrumming through her. Her fingers, insubstantial yet capable of great harm, twitched. They curled into a fist. Sylvanas smiled. Sylvanas did not know how long this seeming freedom from Arthas' control would last. She needed to know more, and she had a hunch that the demons had not traveled far. She sent her banshees to look for them, and as Sylvanas had expected, the demons took the bait and extended an invitation for her to speak with them. She followed the directions her scout had given her, floating over the pine needles and moss that covered the earth of silver pine, heading in the direction of the eerie, sickly light. Balnazar greeted her with the exaggerated politeness of a court newcomer who knew what to do, but not how to do it. Lady Sylvanas, we are pleased that you came. But Sylvanas had had enough of such frivolous courtesies in Silvermoon. She had no wish to banter with demons, so, as she had done in life, she quickly took control of the meeting. How could I not? For some reason, I no longer fear the Lich King's voice in my head. My will is my own once again. You Dreadlords seem to know why. Mathras answered with barely concealed delight. We've discovered that the Lich King is losing his power. As it wanes, so too does his ability to command undead such as you. Okay. I am the only one like me, she thought, but did not say. What of King Arthas? What about his powers? Balnazar, the most elegant among them, said, though his rune blade Frostmourne carries powerful enchantments itself, Arthas' own powers will also fade in time. It is inevitable. She liked the word and thought of the blade that had taken her life, the twining runes etched into the sword, glowing with pale blue light. Sylvanas could not read the runes, but she had stared at the blade often enough, memorizing their shapes. Now the reason for their extreme unction had become clear. You seek to overthrow him and want my help to do it, Sylvanas stated. If Balnazar was the most elegant and Deathrock was the most oafish. Sorry guys, the dog's feeling frisky this morning. His large belly looked soft compared with the powerful physiques of the other two, but his tiny eyes flashed with rage and hatred for Arthas that poured off him It seemed almost as strong as her own.
The Legion may be defeated, but we are the Nathazim. We will not let some upstart human get the best of us. Arthas must fall.
Balnazar stepped in, his voice soothing and reasonable.
The time to strike is now.
His little nails clicking on the floor. Very distracting. He's like playing by himself and probably chasing his tail. The Lich King strays from the path of his master, and
The Lich King strays from the path of his master, and Arthas is too consumed by pride and ambition to be the instrument that is necessary. Confused and distracted, both will be easy to overcome. But we must make sure we do not waste this rare opportunity. The Lich Kel'Thuzad is far too loyal to betray his master. You, on the other hand...
He paused as if the bluntness of the sentiment were too indelicate for him. Sylvanas had no such concern. Hate him, she spat. It felt good to speak the words after thinking them in silence for so long. She had her reasons to feel thus. He had murdered her people, she told them, and turned her into this monstrosity. The closer she seemed to come to her vengeance, the more she did not wish to think on that awful day, and her song at the gates of Silvermoon. I might take part in your bloody coup, she said, hoping that it would in fact be bloody, but I will do so in my own way. She left without another word. She did not have time for it. Time was a precious and unpredictable commodity now, and she would not squander it. Sylvanas would gather her troops, all of them. Not the banshees Arthas had mockingly given her, but the ones he kept from her. She'd led the rangers in life. Now she would lead them again in this unlife. She found some of them wandering the forests, drawn even in death to the woods and growing things. Some had been sent on missions, and had returned to the capital city searching for answers. A few had simply stayed put, reasoning that others would return to scour the city for their sisters. There had been horns, Sylvanas and others had sounded, to call a retreat or signal an attack. Now Sylvanas had only her voice, and she used it as a clarion call. It echoed through the night, laced with pain and longing and rage. Come back to me, she thought as she sang. Return, follow me, and I will lead you. Together we shall strike terror into this world. And they answered with action, strong legs racing yet making no sound, quivers of arrows at their backs and bows in their hands. Sylvanas hovered over them. Our minds are our own again, she told them. I have reached out to you, and you have chosen to answer. We will halt the creature who did this to us, and we will be free. And I shall hunt beside you again, my sisters, shoulder to shoulder. But before that moment, there is a hunt that calls to me, a hunt for vengeance and reward. Will you join me? Their shouts of affirmation almost shook the trees down to their roots. Victory and freedom were at hand. Sylvanas had solved the puzzle. She remembered the last two clues. Arthas had told her the corpse had been preserved, still beautiful but a different hue. The words perfectly described the dark rangers gathered before her. They too were dead, their skin gray, their eyes glowing. Surely whatever dark spell Arthas had used to transform them had also been cast upon her corpse. The only difference might be that her essence, this horrible banshee form, had not merged with it. And if Arthas had not given her body to the trolls, and Sylvanas was certain he had not, there was only one other she could think of, the great betrayer of Quel'Thalas, Darkhan Drathir, whom she would find in his tower. Although for so long Sylvanas could not act, she had always listened. Often Arthas would speak freely in her presence, and why not? Neither of them expected his powers would wane. She had learned that Arthas had raised Darkhan into undeath, after the prince himself, having achieved what he wanted by taking the Sunwell, had slain the traitor. Now the former magister governed the undead in a place Arthas named Deathholm, ruling from the Tower of the Damned, ready to act whenever Arthas would have need of this unit of his army. Sylvanas and her followers went boldly past the spectral guardians who served as the eyes of Darkhan. That she was Arthas's general was widely known. That she was no longer controlled by the Death Knight was not. Because Banshee and Dark Ranger alike were undead, they too went unchallenged as they entered. It took some time, but at last Sylvanas found where Arthas had tucked her corpse away, exactly as described. In the darkness, locked in a coffin of iron that rested on cold stone, with none to mourn her. Her sisters destroyed the iron prison, and Sylvanas beheld herself composed. Still, he had not lied. She was as preserved as her sisters were. You have taken so much, Menethil, but this day I am taking something back. And it would not be by magic, but by sheer will and pure hatred that she would do so. Sylvanas focused on her still form and encouraged the memories that had stung so much a moment ago to return to her now, with all their pleasure and sorrow. The softness of little Virath's baby curls and his smooth cheeks, the welcome coolness of water against her skin on a warm day, the taste of food, the sensation of her body moving swiftly and surely through branches or on the ground, leaping, striking, rolling. The wind in my hair, she thought. I can almost feel it. What it felt like to laugh. My hands holding my bow, the texture of tree bark, and the softness of leaves. The reassurance of an embrace, the brush of a kiss. Dancing in the twilight grass beneath her bare feet, her hands warm and holding those of her sisters as they whirled and laughed while their bright son of a brother played. Sylvanas now seemed to feel the pain in her chest, the sore ache of a throat turned raw with grief. I will hold to my pain. I will grip it tight. It's mine and mine only to feel, and I shall have it. She clenched her insubstantial fists, the first act of independence from her vicious former master, and her fingertips pressed on her palms. She felt the lethargy in her body, as if she had been dosed with all the wound wood in the world. She was paralyzed and for a moment thought her efforts had been for naught. She doubled down on her determination, and at last, though with tremendous effort, Sylvanas opened her eyes. Color, such as it was, had returned, sickly yellows and browns, but she welcomed them nonetheless, for soon she would behold others. Blue skies, green grass, yellow sun. When she lived, it had been nothing at all to blink, to breathe, to speak. Now it was as if she were encased in mud, moving slowly, so slowly, but she was moving. Her body was again hers to command. She forced herself to sit upright, to turn her head this way and that, to make her lungs expand so that she might have air rushing over vocal cords to speak. There were no reflexes to aid her. Her flesh, as she had expected, was the same gray as those of the Dark Rangers, and Sylvanas knew that her eyes glowed red as theirs did. A lock of pale yellow hair, almost white, fell forward into her face. She lifted a clumsy hand to brush it back. She had beaten Arthas on this. She would do it again. I will be his doom, Sylvanas declared, moving lips and tongue and cheeks, learning to speak again as if she were a child. Her voice had an odd sound to it, echoing, hollow, but it was a sound she had made, and she heard it in physical ears. Beside her lay her bow and quiver with a few arrows still in it. Oh, Arthas, you even left me my weapons. She got clumsily to her feet. Her knees buckled and she caught the edge of the stone table with fumbling fingers. Again she tried, and this time she stood wavering slightly but upright. Sylvanas moved her lips in a slow, satisfied smile. Oh, Arthas Menethil, you glorious fool. I name you Prey. Sylvanas had further questions to ask the demon trio before she would make her move against Arthas. In the meantime, she had decided on a particularly cruel way of exacting her vengeance. A thought had been growing ever since the moment Sylvanas struggled with and almost failed in achieving the simple action of opening her eyes, the helplessness of not being able to move, the options it gave one's enemy. It was sometimes painful to think of what and who she had been. She remembered kindness and love, but seemed unable to feel them any more. Yet hidden in her memories were things worth digging for, and she remembered Salthrill's party, fighting trolls. Those memories would now serve her very well. It did not take her long to create the poison and anoint the arrow with it. Woundwood was a topical numbing agent. But what if it were to penetrate deep into the body? No one, of course, knew. That was not its purpose. The trolls had crafted tar-like substances that the Quel'Drai had studied in the hope of creating an antidote. The thought never crossed their minds to replicate the substance. No, in their days of glory, such a brief span of time past, the elves would have seen such appropriation as beneath them. One thing this wretched existence had taught the former Ranger General was that such morality, or perhaps simple superiority, was an impediment, not a virtue. Any scrap of information, any tool, any rumor, she would seize it and twist it to serve her own end, defeating Arthas Menethil in as brutal a manner as possible. So she took the wound wood, used to help and heal those she cared for, and mixed it with the poison used by their ancient enemy to slay her new one. Arthas would be paralyzed, helpless before her as she had been, and he would suffer even more exquisitely than she had, because for him, her suffering had been an amusement. For Sylvanas, Arthas's agony was the only target she could find in her vast sea of loss. She practiced with the new substance on various healthy animals, and then some affected by the plague, observing the amount needed to bring them down quickly and keep them alive and immobile as long as possible. Sylvanas carefully adjusted the mixture until she was satisfied with the ingredient proportions and tested it on a charging bear. The beast bellowed, coming toward her, but it collapsed in only 3 strides after the arrow struck its shoulder. Sylvanas watched and waited. It continued to breathe and even grunt, but its limbs and torso were otherwise still. Sylvanas squatted down beside it, for a moment vaguely uneasy. Once she would have shot to kill instantly. She would not have wanted any creature to suffer needlessly, and she certainly would not have done what she was about to do. But I do need it to suffer. I need to learn, so that I will not fail when my chance finally comes. Its death and torment will not be in vain, but instead serve a greater purpose, eliminating Arthas. The bear's body continued to heave with labored breaths, and as Sylvanas began to cut into its flesh, slowly and carefully, it moaned in deep agony. It did so for a very long time. At last Sylvanas rose, looking down at the bloody mess. She was ready for Arthas Menethil. The trap to catch the king was not among Sylvanas' most elaborate or even most clever, but she had precious few resources at her disposal. She instructed her rangers to shadow the Death Knight closely without revealing themselves, and to seize their chance when it came time to lure him to their mistress. Clumsy. He ought to be able to see right through it, yet somehow Arthas did not suspect the Banshee Rangers of anything when he came under attack and they came to his rescue, promising to lead him to Sylvanas. How? Was he so blinded by ego that he thought she'd forgotten all he had done to her? Truly, the world would be better off rid of his narcissistic, bloodthirsty presence. The openness of the field into which the banshees guided the king, dotted with only the occasional tree, further allayed any suspicions of a trap. Sylvanas had been a superior hunter in life, agile, silent, deadly, but death had only augmented that aspect of her. She did not need to get close to him to shoot. A fleeting memory of life, of Nathanos, of her splitting all but one of his arrows. Sylvanas banished the thought. It would only distract. She wanted to get close to the Death Knight, to sooner begin the second part of her entertainment. She knew he did not see her, did not hear her, yet something startled him, and he cried out, clapping a mailed hand to his chest as the undead horse pranced, agitated beneath him. The Lich King. He had warned Arthas, but it was too late. He seemed faint, blinking, trying to focus. Sylvanas stepped out from behind a slender tree and let him behold her in her old yet new body. He stared, disbelieving. Sylvanas smiled as she lifted her bow. It was already fitted with an arrow fletched with the feathers of the dark eagle, one of the precious few Sylvanas had taken from the quiver of her fallen mother. She had coated its point with poison and spoken a voice dripping scorn and satisfaction. You walked right into this one, Arthas. Her second and third fingers opened, and the liberated arrow raced toward its target, impaling itself precisely where she wished it, in the Death Knight's shoulder. His further confusion was sweet to her, almost but not quite, banishing the leaden, barely acknowledged ache of a deep, resigned pain. He tried to lift his hand to pull it out, but the poison was already working its dark, beautiful, sadistic magic. Rapidly numbing fingers could not grasp the shaft, only paw at it, like a pathetic dog. Arthas gasped, leaning forward on the horse's neck, trying to not slide to the ground in certain death.
What have you done to me?
For the first time since word came of marching undead, Sylvanas felt something close to joy. Angry, cruel, yes, but joy still. It's a special poisoned arrow I made just for you, she said, almost purring, transferring the bow to her back and removing the dagger with which she would slice the Pale King to ribbons. They exchanged words, unimportant now in this time before she began her torment, except for when he demanded, "Finish me, then." Oh no, not when he had done to her the things he had. She thought she'd start with the face, that face that had once been handsome and even now had some hint of beauty to it. You're going to suffer, as I did. Thanks to my arrow, you can't even run. His eyes widened, and for the first time she saw true fear in them. Had she lived, her heart would have leaped in excitement. Sylvanas drew back the dagger and then stared in horror as gray mist somehow grasped her hand and twisted it, forcing her fingers to open and release the blade. The mist shifted, its lines growing clearer, and Sylvanas realized it was the ghost of a young woman, really a girl still, when Arthas had killed her and everyone else at Lordaeron. The little shade was smiling. She was happy to be helping her king. Sylvanas had not thought it possible, but her hatred for Arthas burned even hotter. The misguided spirit was not alone. Kel'Thuzad had arrived, shouting encouragement to his king in his low, sepulchral voice as reinforcements descended en masse. Waves of rotting undead, their eyes glowing, creatures of only slaughter and chaos, converged on Arthas as if freshly conjured by magic. Sylvanas cursed even as she shook off the little ghost and began firing into dead flesh. She had made a terrible mistake. She had been so focused on Arthas, so certain of her victory, she had not paid attention. For a few seconds she fought on, desperate to murder the monster who had made her this way, until she realized that she and her followers were greatly outnumbered. Sylvanas glanced at him one last time, furious. "This isn't over, Arthas. I'll never stop hunting you." She fled, slipping away along with her banshees, easily outpacing the scourge creatures, even though she felt at odds with her body. It continued to feel like something she manipulated and controlled, rather than a true part of her, more like a glove than skin. Perhaps it would feel right when she slew Arthas. She thought about the demon lords. Should she join with them? Arthas was protected by the Lich King, Kel'Thuzad, the Scourge. Sylvanas would need allies, but not them, not unless she had to. I will never be truly free until I have killed the wretch who murdered me. There will always be a chain between us, and I intend to break it. A thought came to her abruptly, at once daring and centering and certain. There was a flicker of fear, too, but she brushed it away. She was different, yes, but she was still Sylvanas. Wasn't she? All right, so we've seen a lot of that before, but it's, I think the most important part is we saw her get her body back, as far as getting to the Sylvanas that we know. And I don't know if any of that happens in the story, in the game, I mean. Okay, we haven't got another episode in Pipe 5x5. Thanks everybody so much for watching and for listening, and I will see you all next time on Lore of Warcraft.